And we're live.
Hey, this is Curt,
And Brad Pinsky.
and we're here for another edition of Fire Law Roundup for November 10th of 2025. Brad, go ahead while I deal with this.
Yes, and for everybody, if Curt doesn't look like he's sitting at a bunch of bookshelves behind him, it's because he's not. He's on the road. Um,
Well, I'm at my dad's house, so
like on the road.
it's his
Let's
South Carolina office. So,
Perfect. Well, we don't have any South Carolina cases today, to my recollection. So let's
well,
start in Seattle. And, first of, I think, three harassment cases. And this week is so symbolic of what you always try to teach people. 70%, right, excluding comp cases, 70% of cases against fire departments are harassment, discrimination, retaliation based. If we could just stop that, we'd cut 70%. I mean, just
well,
don't do it.
all the way through my career, I thought Mrs. Smith suing us if we didn't get there quick enough, or th something happened that maybe wasn't our fault or whatever, but that's what was going to cause us to be sued. And guess what?
That ain't it. It's stupid things we do and say. So and this one, if true, goes beyond stupid. So we have, and this isn't the first time we've seen this, but we have the HR, right? The human resource director who's filing the claims. Normally we get people suing because HR didn't do something. Here, HR is director, former, is suing claim, and she makes a couple of claims. Let me tell you what she says. She says she was terminated in retaliation for reporting certain misconduct, including on-duty drinking, where she found an open can of alcohol in someone in the locker room in someone's locker, and they allegedly refused to do something about it. She also allegedly reported sexism that was also reported before by other women. She says that when she reported things like complaints from other women who reported harassment, a hostile work environment, and I want to say this. So she says, and again, allegedly, we don't know, that one female firefighter even discovered that her uniforms were shredded with a box cutter after filing a complaint about a supervisor. And she says none of these were handled properly. But the part that I like, and I don't know whether, I think this is your summary, but for anyone who hasn't seen Curt speak, so Curt talks about the anatomy kind of a lawsuit and where does it begin. And the last part of what you talk about says the filing alleges a culture within the department that tolerated misconduct. The lawsuit starts not at the filing of the lawsuit, it starts at the culture which allowed it. Because if you had changed the culture, you wouldn't have the lawsuit. And more than that, they wouldn't be able to say, oh, look at the culture of our department, right? But correct the culture, prevent the lawsuit.
Yeah, it's troubling on a couple of levels, and one is if she was the HR director, what was she doing about it, or was she running into like a roadblock at headquarters?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and so well, we've seen people in high-ranking positions alleging discrimination for various sorts, but they're the ones that are in a position to do something about it. And so hopefully now she's got the documentation that she's filed these complaints, she's pushed these complaints. But you would think in most jurisdictions, when someone alleges sexual harassment, some sort of discrimination, it's going to end up being HR that is handling the investigation. So, was there an investigation? Was she expecting someone else? Almost sounds like in some of these that she was expecting someone else to then do the investigation, which is fine if that's, if that's
How it
how
works, right?
if that's how it works, okay? But I got an email from a chief. I don't want to identify the department or whatever, but he had asked whether or not professional standards discipline investigators should go for EEO certification. There's a certification program for EEO investigators. It's
Really?
a
Okay.
32-hour program.
Wow.
And I had never really heard of it before that. So I started doing some research into it. But here's the thing, what the federal government does and what under the past administration they were pushing down because some states and some counties were adopting this. is that you have an independent EEO investigation team. They cannot be part of your normal rank and file because these people have to be able to investigate the investigators.
Yep.
Okay, if that makes sense. So they're not only going to look at the allegation, but what did the department do in response to the allegations? They properly handle it and so on. And so if she's the independent HR, and it wouldn't surprise me that Washington has a requirement that the EEO people be independent. Because you think about it, because part of many of the lawsuits that we see is that the department investigators mishandled it. So you want to have that independent person taking a look at it. Okay, if she's overseeing that, how did it get to this point? So a lot of open-ended questions here. We're certainly not going to have the answers. All I know is everybody that I know in the Seattle Fire Department is a squared away firefighter, squared away chief. I know several of the chiefs there, several of the retired chiefs particularly. It's a squared away department. So the allegations leave me concerned, kind of scratching my head and wondering if there might be uh, more than meets the eye here. You
Yeah. I
know?
mean, the problem is two problems. One, on the one hand, you and I, because we don't know, right? But you and
No, we
I
don't. We don't. No.
want to believe the department because of our firefighter bias. On the
Mhm.
other hand, we're so skewed by looking at all the actual harassment that you're like, oh, I could see that. So I never have any idea like who's
No,
telling the truth.
no, and we don't. And that's why we want to be fair and balanced in terms of presenting these, because sometimes, and I'm not saying in this case,
Right.
sometimes the problem is with the employee that's making the allegations and that they're using this as cover for other problems that they're having. And this is just a convenient,
Yep.
hey, it isn't what I did. It's look what they're doing. So, but, is it the department? Is it this person? Who knows?
Right.
Uh,
Easier to deflect sometimes, right? You
absolutely.
accuse me. Oh, I'm going to accuse everybody, but who
Yeah.
knows? We don't know now.
We don't, we
Um,
don't, we don't.
okay,
But
let's go
in terms in
all.
terms in terms of departments, though, Seattle is
Oh,
has a
yeah.
reputation of being a progressive department, forward thinking. They welcome women. They have one of the highest percentage of women in the fire service, or at least they did at one point. They made a very, very strong effort back in the 90s to recruit and retain women. So, you know,
All right. Well, let's go all the way across back to the East Coast to Pennsylvania. Again, also disturbing. And I'm going to say something up front, and I'm going to sound like a horrible person,
yeah.
but I can see this.
I
So
I have seen it. So
yeah. So, and we're, I don't know that we're going to look good when we say that, but so we have a female firefighter in the Newcastle, Pennsylvania, in Newcastle, PA. She's filed suit alleging that she's been, harassed, discriminated against, and retaliated. And she claims it's because of her gender, but more so, I think, her disability, and that they kind of, she alleges the department kind of orchestrated this whole isolation routine, harassment, and undermining her in order to make her quit or get terminated. And I think the reason why, even though it's kind of buried down there, is apparently she has Asperger's and she's admittedly says she's socially awkward. So she's brilliant by her own allegation, but also socially awkward. Think Sheldon on Big Bang
Sheldon
Theory.
Cooper, yeah,
Right. I mean, that's your Asperger's individual. So, can we see the members of the fire department who would risk their lives to save any person they don't know? Can we
mhm,
also see members of a fire department harassing someone and making fun of them based on a disability?
absolutely,
Unfortunately, yes.
absolutely. And we unfortunately depend an awful lot on peer pressure in the fire service to get people to conform to our norms. We have our norms, and people say, "Oh, we shouldn't have norms." And norms are it's part of life. It's
Right.
part of life. Okay, you and I have a norm. When you're talking, I listen. When I'm, and vice versa. Norms
When you're
develop.
talking, I keep talking.
Yeah, but norms develop automatically,
Right.
okay, in any sort of a group. So the idea that there should be no norms is it's baloney. But we use peer pressure to sort of get people to conform with the norms. Well, that works with 9 out of 10 people, okay? But when we're dealing with someone who has a condition, whether it's Asperger's, she also has OCD, at least according to the complaint. They didn't spell it out. There's really two conditions that kind of concern me. One is OCD, that's obsessive compulsive disorder. That's an anxiety disorder. And that is, you see these folks that they have to turn on the lights like 3 times, or they have to knock 3 times, or,
Yep.
and I'm just saying three, it could be five, could be two,
Right.
whatever it is. But they have certain rituals that then in turn reduces the anxiety. That's OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. There's another condition, totally unrelated, has a similar name called obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is the most frequent personality disorder. And I think we have a ton of these folks in the fire service, okay? And they tend to get overly focused on certain tasks and not deal with other tasks, and they become a problem. They're your micromanagers. Maybe some of you have had to work for somebody who's a micromanager a little bit, maybe not to the level of becoming a diagnosable patient with it, but having tendencies toward that OCPD, the personality disorder, where they just get lost in the details. And sometimes they don't finish things because they're just so caught up in it. If you go to homes where they're full of clutter, and it's difficult to navigate around and so on. That's one example. There's other conditions also that can lead to that as well. But OCPD is a very common one. And I can see fire service norms developing, or fire service norms being applied to someone like this. And it's going to constitute harassment. There's no two ways about it. And it's all the more reason why our officer corps needs to be trained up to recognize this and get it to stop. This is not acceptable. We can't use what works on 9 out of 10 people with someone with this sort of a disability. You can't do it.
And the problem is it's not acceptable, but it is understandable, right? It's the
Right.
same reason we haze.
Predictable.
Predictable.
What does Gordon Graham say, right?
Yeah, it's
If it's
predictable. Yeah.
predictable, it's preventable, you know?
And the problem is we want to know that you've got my back in the fire. We want to know that we're all on the same page. We all know what we're going to do. When we step off that engine or that truck, we all have our assignments and you've got my back, I've got yours, right? And when people are different, they threaten that, I think, unintentionally or intentionally, but they threaten that feeling like, okay, we're all on the same page. We've got each other. You've got this. And it could be because they're heavy, they're short, they're green, they're, whatever they are, they're different. And
Mhm.
so, like now, what you said, we don't like different. It's unsettling in the fire service.
Right. And there's all sorts of norms. Like one of the challenges with personality disorders is these folks don't pick up on norms. And a norm could be something like if your shift changes at 8 o'clock, a norm could be that you come in at 7:15. Well, when you don't follow that norm, and that's just one example, okay? But when you don't follow the norm, the peer pressure often is used to get the person to recognize the norm and get it. Well, it comes
Or to
across
get
to
them
the
out.
it comes across to the person as harassment. Okay.
Right.
And there's a lot of other things. When housework starts, okay. Uh, who's responsible for what types of housework and so on. So, again, it's almost predictable. I'm sure she is not the only one who is suffering in the fire service from this fact pattern. And you know,
But, and I'm going to sound like a real, what here, but, and I don't mean this individual,
yeah,
but not everybody belongs in the fire service, right? We are not a community social club.
yeah,
My God, look at the FDNY in the last couple of days. We're losing people and people are getting hurt right and left. This is not for everybody. And I'm not saying that people with disabilities, right, shouldn't be in the fire service, but sometimes it's possible they're not the right fit. Now, I don't know that judges understand that, but they're not always the right fit. So sometimes what's happens, not saying here, we
Mhm.
orchestrate a way to convince them they're not the right fit. Um, and maybe that's what happened. I'm not justifying it,
Right.
right?
And there is no justification. And that's, I think, when officers aren't trained on how to document, like how to work with someone who's struggling with competency and get them to, get them to the point where they realize they can do it or they can't do it. And then when they realize they can't do it, or the officer realizes can't do, then it's a matter of documenting it,
Right.
document it, give them the chance, give them the chance. But at some point, you've got to say, look, that you're not where we need you to be at, certainly at this point. And then what happens though, if the person is in a protected class, they flip the script around, and now we've got that situation. So
And going back to the same lesson we talked about from you before, that the lawsuit starts before, I want to mention, and it's not going to be lost on anybody, she alleges she is the first, and she probably is the first female firefighter in the 155-year history of the department. That fact alone is going to buy her a ton of credit.
yeah.
It just is.
Mhm.
If she was the 100th female firefighter, nobody would care. But you're the first or the second, that's going to buy you a lot of credit with the court. So again, we don't know,
Mhm.
but the problem is, are you and I so slanted where we're like, oh yeah, we could see that happening?
Oh, I don't think there's anybody out there that's a firefighter that's listening to this that wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, she would have a problem in my department as well." And again, to me, from a chief's perspective, I got to make sure that my company officers recognize this and deal with each little thing that happens in the firehouse appropriately to get the norming behaviors, the teasing, the pranks and things
Stop.
to stop.
Yep.
Stop, and certainly not be creating certain tests for her. This should be done by the training division, probably in conjunction with HR, maybe even with legal to develop any sort of an evaluation that you can't have firefighters sort of making things up as they go along.
No, and in fact, if this was a must-have policy subscriber, what they would know, because it's one of our first policies we do, is you need a list of JPRs, a list of tasks that people have to be able to perform.
Right.
That's the skills test. You can do the job or you can't. Regardless of whether you're disabled or not, can you do the job or you can't? I suspect she probably could, just maybe not in a manner they were comfortable with. But again, we don't know. We don't
Yeah.
know. But sad that you and I can both, and probably everybody could see this happening.
Yeah, it's sad, and hopefully they can get this rectified, and she can, assuming that she's got the capabilities, that she can have a productive career. But
Okay, well, now
yeah.
we go down to Nassau County, New York. This is my client. I want to be careful, not the person who's suing, um, but the fire company, the fire department is my client. I
Why
am
am I
not.
not surprised?
I
Why am
know. Well,
I not surprised?
but I am not handling this lawsuit. I specifically said I don't want to handle this, so I'm not handling it. I did handle, but it's important. I did handle the related one. You cite to that here, where I won in court against him. So let me tell you what this is, because I, this is my opinion. This is my view. I can't tell anybody any more clearly. This is my view as the attorney for the company who was somewhat involved in this. But here's what happens. You got this guy who's a retired FDNYer, all respect, and he's disabled from the job. But we get a question. Let me start with the question. We get a question all the time whenever I teach disability. Is a disability an excuse for misconduct? And the answer is not, right? If I go up to the chief and start saying, Chief, F you, F you, F you, and then I'm like, oh, that's my disability. I have Tourette's or whatever.
Yeah, if he's got Tourette's, that's a little bit of a different thing.
A little bit of different.
But now we also go back to your JPRs.
Right, right,
And hopefully our JPRs are written in a way that they can conduct themselves socially, yet socially in a socially appropriate manner when dealing with, colleagues and the public.
right.
So,
So disabilities aren't excuses for misconduct. So, like if you're an alcoholic and you drink on duty, saying, "Oh, well, I was in recovery." Oh, well, right. So what happens here is a number of things. He last year in 24, he was yelling at a woman in front of a whole bunch of people, really demeaning, harassing, and there's like 10 witnesses. And then he gets into an argument outside. None of this is allegedly. This is all what's, I guess, been said in court. A court already found this at state court, which is going to be my point. Remember, a state court already made some determinations. So the state court found, well, so what happens, he then goes down out, people are standing outside the bays, and he gets nose to nose, spitting with people, thumping chests, right? And yelling, "You're discriminating against me because of my disability," but he's violent. He's violent. So maybe he has a disability, maybe he doesn't, but he's violent. So he gets suspended. He gets suspended a second time. He gets suspended a third time. And then he has a quasi hearing / investigation, which I was present at. And he didn't show up. He refused to show up. We kept saying, "Come, come, come. We need to hear your side of this." But a bunch of other people showed up. A woman who said, "You're in my face," and 2 witnesses to the violence, the workplace violence situation. And he keeps saying, "Well, I'm disabled. I'm disabled." Well, again, a disability is not an excuse for workplace violence. So in the state court, he sued, and the court, one, threw it on technicality, said that he didn't exhaust his administrative remedies. He had an internal appeal. He didn't use that. So that was my argument, and it won. But the judge went one step further, which is incredibly important to this. So now he's filed in federal court, the state alleging disability discrimination. But the judge at the state court said, as a matter of law, the decision of the fire department to suspend him and require anger management was not arbitrary and capricious. So the judge has really already said, a judge has already said, look, they did what they could have done. So now if I'm defending this in federal court, and I'm not, they have a good lawyer doing it, but I would be saying law of the case, right? The judge already said this had nothing to do with disability. It had to do with workplace violence conduct. But he's now sued. So he sued in the EEOC and lost. And he sued in state court and lost. So now he's suing in federal court, and I suspect will lose. But again, this whole case for me is a really good point. Again, and I've said it twice, you cannot use a disability as an excuse to violate protocol.
right. Well, I got a couple more procedural questions for you.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the Oyster Bay Fire Department Company Number 1 is a 501c3 or 501c4?
They are C3, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so the ADA applies. So we're not going to,
Right.
although there's a factual question about whether it applies to volunteers and whether he's a volunteer and so on and so forth. But 42 USC Section 1983 and the 14th Amendment don't apply to a volunteer fire company. They apply to a municipality or some sort of a government agency.
And yet but the Second Circuit, like with sexual harassment and other things, have said, right, since you receive all of your money from the town, from a municipality, and because fire protection is a traditionally governmental function, they will apply some of those.
Really?
But not in every instance.
In federal court?
In federal court, the Second Circuit Court of
Really?
Appeals, for example, for sexual harassment, some others, has said they're a government agency based on those 2 factors. Not everything, but the Second Circuit is very employee friendly, so to speak, or volunteer friendly.
Wow, I'm surprised. Now, again, not talking Title VII and not talking like something like the ADA. ADA is clearly it's going to apply to
Definitely.
employers. Now, there's a factual question whether or not he's an employee and eligible. That maybe maybe not under the employment branch, but under the public the public access branch. But 1983, I don't know. I don't
I don't,
know.
and I'm not telling you off the top of my head whether 1983 in the Second Circuit has been applied, but the problem is with the Long Island companies, they get a lot of benefits, right?
Well,
So they're
right.
treated as an employee because they got very good low SAP,
Oh, I see what you're
$110,000
saying.
low
Yeah,
SAP.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I
they
see.
convert them to treat them as an employee because of low
Okay.
SAP and training and benefits and all that. They
And where
said
does does the money flow through the fire company? Or I don't want you to give
the
away any.
town, it comes through the town.
It comes from the town. Was the town named? I don't know.
No, I don't think the town was named.
Oh, well,
I didn't see it, but
we're giving his attorney some tips here.
yeah, well, he could use it, frankly. But this is just like I lost here, I lost here. This is
Yeah.
the third strike, and I look. We'll see. I'm going to talk to that attorney, the defense attorney. But to me, I think the state court decision decided this, and the
Yeah.
federal court shouldn't be
It's
second guessing.
it's that's unfortunate. I mean, somebody put in a career in FDNY, now is volunteering, and you know, um, maybe he can get whatever you know, whatever he needs so that he could become a productive member of the organization again. That'd be helpful. Because I don't know. At
Yeah.
any rate, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I will tell you it. I'm around a lot of fire departments and they all see this and talk to me and they're like, oh yeah, that's Joe Boy. That's his nickname, Joe Boy. And they're like, oh yeah, we're not surprised. We're not surprised he popped off at someone. Who knows? Your reputation precedes you. But in this case, there are so many witnesses who came and testified that he's poking and spitting and yelling and nose to nose. I just don't see anybody saying, yeah, your disability excuses that.
Yeah.
That's where I come on the law. Okay, let's go to Paducah.
Yeah.
Um,
We covered this not that long ago, 3 or 4 months
did.
ago.
Yeah. So now this is the actual, I guess, suit. But
I think if I can quote you, I said this is going to go to court.
oh yeah, yeah.
You had
And
a good prediction.
and listen, this is. I mean, we have a lot to talk, but I'll review the facts. So we've got a now former Paducah fire captain, but most importantly, and the union president. He files a 34-page complaint in federal court. That's not so unreasonable. Another one of these had 800 pages.
Oh yeah, that was the Pennsylvania case.
Yeah, I had to look to see whether it was really 800, but it really was
Oh, it
800.
was. Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
And anyway, he alleged that his termination was because he was being retaliated against for his union involvement, his protected speech, his petitioning activities, and his wage-related complaints. Now, this is going to be okay, that's what he alleges, right? The city, and he was the president of the local. He had a hearing before the Paducah Board of Fire Commissioners. And they said that, wait a minute, you violated many provisions of the city code and you were insubordinate and acted improperly. So he alleges that this is just retaliation for his outspoken advocacy on public safety issues and his actions on behalf of the local 168. So this is a either or, right? I mean, as a union president, he's not an employee, so his speech would be protected by the First Amendment. On the other hand, as an employee, if he was using his union pedestal to violate misconduct, same rule I just said with disability, right? You can't cloak misconduct in, oh, I'm doing it as a union. You can't touch me. I don't know what the answer is, but this
It's
is
going to
not
turn on the
uncommon.
facts. Yeah, it's going to turn on the facts, and you're going to have to develop a factual record for what exactly he said, what exactly he did, and then being able to connect his statements and his advocacy to the decision to terminate him.
Now, there's one part I do want your opinion on because I don't really know how this comes down. So, yes, we agree speech as union rep is protected. But as a union rep, allegedly, he applies for a grant for $5,000 for safety equipment. And the city says, you stated that you had our support and approval to do so, and you didn't. So, okay, wait a minute. But he did that as the union president, not as an employee. Does that line here save him, or does it not matter?
It's a good question. I think you'd have to look at the grant language as particularly if it's a government grant. I'm not sure exactly what the grant is, but think about the regulations that are on like an AFG grant. I don't think it was an AFG grant, but
No, too small.
if you were to misrepresent,
Ugh,
right now that opens up a whole nother can of worms.
right.
But what does permission, for example, can a captain give permission? Well, if I'm a firefighter, my captain gave me permission, I can. Now, he's a captain. Can his battalion chief? Can his assistant chief? Can the chief of department? Is it only the chief of department?
Right.
And
And do you
I
even
don't
need
know.
it? Do you
Yeah,
even need
lots.
their permission? We don't know, right? We haven't seen the grant,
Right,
but this,
right. So,
this is the same of every lawsuit. The tale of two cities. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's lying? Who's telling the truth?
yeah,
Every lawsuit.
yeah.
So okay, I think, is this the last one?
The last one is Virginia, and it's an
Yeah, I
interesting
love
case.
this.
Yeah.
So we have seen a couple medical marijuana cases. We saw one in Buffalo about a year and a half, Buffalo, New York, and they settled it. I think we predicted that actually, that they would settle it, and they did immediately, where they terminated an employee who had PTSD for using medical marijuana. We've seen a case in, not here, although it's probably in your database, but in Massachusetts many years ago, where the state court says, I don't care whether it's illegal federally, in Massachusetts, it's legal, so you can't punish somebody. And then before I get to this one, and then we've seen a federal case which said the opposite. We don't care that it's legal under state law, under the ADA, it's a controlled substance, and you can't use a controlled substance to treat a disability if it's illegal. And right, you can't use medical marijuana. So here we have a case that's very much in line with the Massachusetts cases. You start seeing and I'm tracking these because there are very few of them. That's why I can cite these quickly. But you were seeing these two kind of in federal court here and state court here. So here's the state court line. We have a firefighter who's using a cannabis oil, and there's a Virginia state law, very much like some other states, not others, and it says, and by the way, I happen to like this law. So I like how this is written. New York is way too lenient, but this says, on the one hand, no employer can discharge, discipline, discriminate against an employee for the lawful use of cannabis oil, as long as they have medical certification, etc. However, the law goes on, and I like this to say, but nothing restricts an employer's ability to take any adverse employment action for any work impairment caused by the use of cannabis oil, and to prohibit possession during work hours. That's the right, fine. You want to use it off duty, but you can't be impaired on duty. But here's the fire department statement. And I know fire departments go both ways on this, what they want. But here's the problem. There's no scientific way today to prove impairment from from THC. If this was alcohol, where the field sobriety test has an 82% of predictive value, right? And where you could then do a breathalyzer to confirm present intoxication, no problem. But you can't. And even the Federal Highway Traffic Administration, who does a study a few years ago trying to prove when are you impaired, they couldn't prove impairment.
Yeah.
So
My advice has been to couple it with a video. You got a video, and guys say, well, how am I supposed to capture it on video? Well, if the person is not displaying outward symptoms that are capable of being captured on video, then maybe you don't have reasonable suspicion.
right.
Because right, if they're having trouble talking or walking, or they're speaking incoherently where they don't normally speak incoherently. Sometimes firefighters speak incoherently, but
Yep.
if they're acting or behaving in a way that causes you to believe they may be impaired, record it, video record it, and then
Oh,
and of course,
and I
with a
have the
policy,
amendment.
you want to make sure you're doing that with a policy, not just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. But
But what I added, we've talked about this before. I think you liked it. So I keep saying it. When you're videoing them, I would also go to my essential job performance requirements, my JPRs, like you have to be able to tie a knot. If you're a paramedic, you have to do dose calculations. If you have to be able to get in turnout in a minute and 10 seconds, I would have them perform that. Those skills. If they can perform this basic skills, they're not impaired. Now, if they can't perform them, we can't say they're impaired, but we can say they're at least incompetent at the
Well,
moment.
we're documenting that we've got reasonable suspicion, number one. Then the test comes back. And now I think when you couple the video with the results, it's better than just the results and some sort of verbal explanation of what you saw. It's here's the video, here's the results. And I think what happens now is, each side is going to have an expert. The city's going to have an expert. The firefighter is going to have an expert. When you couple the video with the test now, it gives a little bit more support to the city side of it, I think.
Yeah, video's always better, right? Because his eyes were glassy, his skin was red, he was slurring his speech.
How
A
red?
video is so
How
much
glassy?
better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I agree with you. But until there's and I'm told everyone keeps telling me, oh, there's an epithelial, like a scrape test for cannabis. I've never seen it, and I look for this stuff. So whoever invents it is going to be rich as hell because every state and employer will adopt it, but it doesn't exist today.
Yeah,
So
it's just not as simple as alcohol. Put it that way.
it is. If this was alcohol, it would never be an issue. The 8-hour bottle to throttle rule would be easy to enforce, but not this. Not this. So anyway, that's it for this week.
All right. Yeah, that was an interesting week, a long week, but good stuff. And I thought you were traveling.
I had a conference all weekend. I had a conference in Syracuse, 150 attendees. I quoted you 150 times, probably. We got some good subscribers out of it. But no, I was up doing a board of director training.
Oh, so you were flying home yesterday.
I was
thought you-
flying.
oh, I got you.
Yeah, I went from New York to Florida. So
Okay. All right. Well, my travel wasn't too bad today, and we got a
my
couple.
travel sucked. So thank you, Democrats. I really
All
appreciate
right.
it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. We'll see you all next week. Brad, thank you very much.
Take care.